Hello, this is RJB-Mallacore, and I'm going to be doing some 3D modeling for you today. I'm actually kind of impressed by how many people have turned out today. Way more than I sort of expected, so thank you for coming and seeing what I'm doing. So the model that I'm going to be working on today is one of my older Stargate models. I started this one about 10 years ago and sort of left it on the back burner because I took a bit of a hiatus from doing 3D modeling. So I finally got around to finishing it off, and so we're going to be focusing on that. Just wanted to make sure everybody can hear me fine. So before we get too involved in the model itself, I think I'm going to do a bit of a recap of the stuff that I've done over the last couple months. Al's already pretty much seen this, so it's not a surprise to him, but I'm sure he always enjoys seeing the pictures. So let's open things up. So this is the heavy shuttle that I made for the Abydos class. So I wanted something that was a little bit more rugged and for situations where the ship's transporters wouldn't be working, where you'd be entering like a hostile atmosphere to land people or extract people or bring materials down. And it's much larger than just a normal, day-to-day use kind of shuttle. So here's some more views of it. Top view, bottom view, front, back, side. And again, like a lot of the small elements like underside thrusters for landing, and you have the main entrance in the back. This shuttle I decided to make limitedly hyperspace capable, so it does have a hyperspace drive located in the back. And sort of in a comparison to the the Prometheus, it could hover over the surface, but it's not necessarily ideal to take your ship down. And if your environment's pretty hostile, I don't think you want to take everybody down with it. And sort of jumping back here, basically a comparison to the shuttle from Destiny. So this is a fan-made model, so proportions might be a little bit off. And then sort of in comparison with the Daedalus, the Abydos, and its shuttle. Just sort of giving an idea of, the size and scope of these ships. And then, the pretty pictures. So we have the shuttle with the Abydos. Shuttle heading up to the Phoenix. And then just the shuttle by itself. And then one of the commission models that I did this year was the Helios. So I sort of call it the Daedalus. If the Daedalus went to the gym, decided to work out and get some muscle, this would be what the ship would look like. And the concept behind this ship is it's a long-range assault vessel. So a lot of enhanced missiles that it can launch. It would also have drone launchers. Yeah, basically the Daedalus on steroids. And it also would have your standard Asgard beam weapons. So a few more views of the ship and in relationship to the Daedalus. So it really shows you how beefier the ship feels in comparison. So it's not necessarily bigger, but it's heavier, more armored, more dense, basically ready to fight. And then, you can't have a ship without doing the standard hyperspace scene. And then a few more pretty shots of the Helios. And then this brings me to one of the other ones I did recently, which for a long time I've wanted to do a Earth-built equivalent to the Atlantis puddle jumper. So I wanted something a little bit more chunkier, a little bit less high-tech feeling, so it's, you know, basically a lot less refined. Like the back end I left open because I wanted to separate the engines from the cab, because the ships are always getting shot in the back end, and last thing you want is, you know, something leaking or exhaust entering the cab and putting your crew in danger. So I know that was a thing that a lot of people mentioned, is the use of the space there, which I did address later on. A few more shots of the gate ship. And the entrance into there is extra high because I want to make sure that if you had to load larger cargo into the ship, that there would be extra room. So sort of in relationship to a puddle jumper, again a fan-made model, so proportions are a bit off, but it is scaled to the proper circumference. And then sort of in relationship to the actual Stargate and to an average height person. So it actually really makes you realize how big these actual ships are. Like when you see them flying through space, and you know, you think to yourself that you know, a puddle jumper is quite a bit smaller than what it actually is. Because even when you look here and then you compare it to the size of a human, you know, they're still a fair-sized ship. And then in comparison to my heavy shuttle, so it shows you how big the shuttle from Destiny is compared to something like the puddle jumper. And then to sort of address the issue of utilizing the backspace more efficiently, I came up with the concept of a cargo pod that can be loaded into the ship, so the crew would enter, cargo would be loaded beforehand, and they would just slide into the back, and then when they reach the planet it would just be ejected, then the crew would leave the ship. So again, a few more views. So you have the cargo hatch for the module there, and it would basically be held on by a special kind of magnetic clamp. And again, a few pretty shots of things in action. I've been sort of using this angle for the Phoenix a lot because I just always love how the different colors in that show, and it really, I think, shows off its form in such a unique way. And weapons, the ship does have the capability of launching drones, and it does have a miniaturized version of the Asgard plasma beams. Of course, with size, power is scaled accordingly, so you know, even though they're powerful weapons, at that scale it might be more something along the lines of devastating to something like an El-Cash versus an actual larger ship. And then another sort of planetary scene. This is probably one of my favorite ones I've done with it so far. Just, I love having the angle drifting down to the planet. And the other thing I want to do with it at some point is I haven't had a chance to build up a actual planetary set, and I'd like to do, you know, an actual scene where it's either coming out of the gate, heading towards a gate, and something along that lines. But again, a fair bit of work to actually build up a decent terrain. And then one of my personal projects is I finished reading David E. Tyler's Bobbyverse books, and I decided to do the main ship from it, or at least my interpretation of it. The cover art is a little bit more simplistic, but I wanted something a lot more mechanical, and so this was sort of my last month's fun project. So a few more views of that. And then starting this month, Adam Azel, he came up with a concept art for a early Gould shuttle, and I sort of like the design, and not necessarily for an early Gould shuttle, but for me, I sort of viewed it as maybe something that the Free Jaffa might want to use, taking, you know, Gould technology, simplifying it more while keeping some of the cultural elements, but less of the flashiness that the Gould had before. Hello, Raj. And this is basically untextured finished model at this point. So for a simple design, I'm actually quite happy with how it came out. One of the things that never was really shown was a lot of the bottom, so I sort of had to do a fair bit of guesswork. And one of the elements that I wanted to include is in earlier episodes of the original Stargate series, they had floating shipyards for the Goa'uld, and they had these triangular glowing engines that held them up. So I wanted to sort of incorporate that content into the design and sort of connect it with that aspect of their technology. So they'd be like a kind of a landing thruster of some kind. And then that sort of brings us to where we are now. The shuttle, I probably am not going to have any weapons on the shuttle. Again, it's just hauling cargo. Like I do plan to do sort of a larger, heavier, maybe assault ship in the future. Maybe something along the similar concept. Because right now I'm sort of doing my own expanded universe, and main focus has been on Earth, but I do want to expand on some of the other races and start to build up content from there. And I'm sure a lot of people have seen that I've started to release some of the spec sheets. So I want to slowly go through my Earth fleet that I've done to date, do a proper spec sheets for them, since I've basically scaled everything and worked out a basic idea of how technology is going to balance itself out between them. And I sort of want to take those spec sheets and put them together into a PDF and release them to people so that they can use them for, let's say, if you want to do Stargate RPGing, and you could use it as sort of a basis for like a source book. And as I add more ships, I'll update them and re-release them, and hopefully people will get some use out of them. And as I go on, I want to sort of expand it and have like the first book will be focused on ships, and then future books I want to maybe focus on like different technologies, maybe more ground-based technologies, political aspects of my own mental version of post-disclosure future for Stargate. And at some point I'm sure there'll be another series and things will sort of separate into you could call it my own alternate reality. But as I said, I'm hoping that it'll be of some assistance to people, and hopefully stir on their own creativity and help them along. And that sort of brings us to what we are working on today, which is, again, as I said, one of my earlier Stargate designs. I started this one 10 years ago, left it pretty basic, and have been sort of working on it off and on since. So my big goal for this month is to get this one done. So we'll be sort of focusing on that one. So here's where we're still at with it. And the areas that I'm probably going to focus on today is I want to build up some mechanical elements. Oops. Mechanical elements down in here. So there's some sunken areas that I want to fill in. And then I also want to work on the front a bit and start filling in at least the sides. And I've given a little thought since yesterday on weapon layout. And I think I'm going to make these pods into some sort of missile or drone launcher, but I do want some sort of secondary weapon, so I might add in some sort of plasma pulse cannons into the front. Like, I know I could probably incorporate railgun technology, but I like the concept of at least one weapon that isn't reliant on ammo. So I'm going to pull up this area just to give myself a cleaner view of where I'm working. And start thinking of what I want to put in here. Yeah, lately I've been very big into sort of cylinder-shaped mechanical elements. Don't really know why, they just sort of been growing on me lately. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. I definitely don't mind answering them. And I did on my Facebook page release a small tutorial on how I do my nebulas in Lightwave for anybody that's interested. And probably one of the most challenging things in building these models is trying to come up with fresh ideas for different parts. It's so easy to start to get repetitive. So we'll extend that down into there. I think we'll bring that in a little bit more. And I want to sink this in, sort of build up some depth to the part. So I'll bring that down a bit more. Look, I don't mind it protruding, but I don't want it to protrude too much, so I think that's not too bad. I want to sort of keep these mechanical elements sort of a bit on the pronounced side. Bring that in a little lower. And I like to color code my parts just to help myself keep track of what I'm doing and keeping elements separated, and just for me I find it helps keep things a little bit neater and tidier when I'm doing what I'm doing. Sort of round that out a bit. I think that's already looking pretty decent so far. And build up a little bit of depth on this section. Do the same thing with this. And I think I want to break this up a little bit more. Let's go about there. Go a little bit more aggressive on this one. And maybe instead of being an outie, I'm going to do it as an innie. Yeah, it's amazing how the small elements can play such a big part. Just a few extra little areas raised and sunk in can make a huge difference on how a piece on the model looks. So I think I want to build some little parts that go into there, just to sort of fill that in a bit more. Welcome back. I think I'll make that the gray color. I'll have to take a look at that later. Again, I haven't had too much time to play with the different stream settings, so I've been doing a little bit of experimenting, but definitely input is appreciated. And one of the things I was talking about yesterday was about my model goals for this month, and obviously one of them was to finish off the Gould shuttle, which is now done. My next one is to finish off the Mara, And then one of my next goals after that is I wanted to do, like, I'm a big fan of the original Transformers, and I sort of wanted to do Megatron's ship from the beginning of the series, the Nemesis. So I want to sort of do my own interpretation of that ship. So those are sort of the big 3 projects I want to aim for this month. And then if I do have extra time this month, the next project I want to work on is I want to do another module for the Abydos. Well, I may talk to you later about settings and that, and maybe you can give me some knowledgeable input on better ways to set up some text boxes. Because there's nothing ever wrong about asking for help. Take these backmost ones and bring them in a touch. Which side am I on? Yeah, I was actually playing with Steam Element today, and that's actually what the boxes are done in, but I didn't see anything for side-scrolling. I know it's there somewhere, but I didn't see the option. So I may have to take another look later. I'm definitely noticing that a lot of different stream settings tend to be tucked away in not always the most obvious place. I think that's looking pretty decent. Make a copy of that in another layer and save it, because I always like to save little bits and pieces because they always come in hand down the line. And I'm thinking in this section maybe something a little bit more, maybe flat. Just to sort of keep the height element down a bit. And the other thing is, if anybody is interested in giving suggestions on future models, I'm definitely not opposed to hearing different ideas. Because there are moments where, you know, I can't think of anything to do, and it's always good to have some options on what to sort of work on, and it doesn't have to be Stargate related. I'm definitely open to other franchises. In the future, one of the things I do want to do is, growing up I was a big Space Above and Beyond fan, and I would like to do a few original ships from the setting, and I'd like to do sort of a rebuild on the Saratoga and sort of take the original design and expand on it and try to make it a little bit more, what would be sort of the way to put it. One of the biggest issues with the ship was always it lacked a lot of defense on the underside, and I'd like to sort of increase better coverage of its weapon systems if I did do a rebuild of it. Like, I'd like to try to stay true to it, but I'd like to sort of grow on it and sort of expand on it. So I should fix this edge because I really don't want to have a lopsided looking ship. And I think I'm going to turn this into sort of raised panels. I think that works good so far. It isn't quite overwhelming, so that's always my goal. You open Blender and then, much like me, you'll be there for the next 2 or 3 hours and plunking away, so once you start it's really hard to stop. Are you still going to be working on cleaning up the Star Trek models that you were working on? Well, I definitely give you a lot of credit there, though. Cleaning up models is so tedious. I think I would have almost lost half of my mind. I was trying to find those stray polygons and flip polygons, and before I did my stream yesterday, I was working on the Gould Shuttle a few days earlier, and I accidentally botched up a section and ended up having to spend about 2 hours cleaning that up. By the end I was like, please, let it stop. Yeah, some models end up being almost too visually dense. I think I'll bring this in more, yeah. Now, is that going to be too big? Yeah, I think that's almost going to be too much. Oh, and sort of started talking about Stargate designs. Have you started to watch the new season of Lower Deck? It surprisingly became my new favorite modern Star Trek series. Lower Decks is the new animated Star Trek series that they've been doing. So it's it can be cartoony at times, but it brings in a lot of the references from different Star Trek series, and I find it just generally fun to watch. And compared to a lot of like you look at Discovery and you look at Picard, and they've become very nitty gritty, dirty kind of series, and I sort of miss the old lighthearted Star Trek. Like, don't get me wrong, like, I enjoyed Deep Space Nine. I really enjoyed the Dominion War. It was a nice little departure, but I just find the new series almost get too dark at times, and you just need a moment along the way that sort of lightens it up and sort of brings it back to that traditional element of Star Trek and exploring. Yeah, they've done a good job with references. Like in that Collector's episode, they were, referencing things from the original series, and they've even were referencing things from the original animated series, which I thought was sort of a nice element. No, it definitely feels like a show for the fans. And I'm actually looking forward to the other animated one that they're having coming out, the one that's being done by Nickelodeon. Like, my understanding is it's a little more geared towards the youth, but like visually it looks absolutely beautiful, and definitely willing to give it a sort of a chance. And I am sort of interested to see where they're going to take the Picard series too, because my understanding is they're bringing in John Delancey and he's coming back in his role as Q. And I've always enjoyed when John Delancey showed up in The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager. So if it ends up as like a road not taken sort of scenario, it'll be sort of interesting to see where they take the series in that regard. I think that pretty much finishes off that area. And I imagine a lot of people have noticed that I try to sort of incorporate to incorporate the Earth home symbol in part or in full. I think it's just a nice way to bring the Stargate universe together. Okay, let's have a peeky see up front. Okay, what do I want to do with you? Well, it may end up being a bomber of sorts, because I did want to sort of turn, just give me a second here, sort of these pods down there into like some sort of missile or drone launching bay. But I do want to do some sort of secondary weapon up front. And when I originally designed it years and years back, the whole concept behind it was sort of to be Earth's, what would you call it, equivalent to something like an Al-Cash. Of course, the hard part is like I have this and I have the Fenrir, which are very similar sized vessels. So having this one as more of a bomber kind of ship and keeping the Fenrir more as a patrol vessel, I think sort of balances out the two designs. And then it doesn't keep them competing for the same role. And talking about future projects, one of the ones I do want to tackle, it may end up being like a next month kind of thing, is I want to take the Excalibur and actually do a complete rebuild on it. It was one of the first models that I was building for Stargate, that and the Ares. And, you know, they still hold up fairly decently, but you know, both have aged and they can definitely use a redo. Plus it'd be a good opportunity to sort of rebuild its weapon layout. Because when I originally built the Excalibur, I'm probably going to do it as a complete rebuild. So I'll try to keep the main general shape, but I do want to sort of expand on it and sort of build it up to my more modern standard. Like one of the elements that I do want to keep on the Excalibur is it had beam weapons on each side based on the satellite weapons that they found in Atlantis. So I want to sort of keep that element because, you know, Asgard beam weapons are powerful, but, you know, they're not quite to the same level of cutting a Wraith hive ship in half like, a knife through butter. But I do want to upgrade like a lot of the other weapon systems on it because they are or have become pretty dated. So since we are sort of discussing other series, is there anything anybody else is looking forward to coming back and sort of watching? Yeah, that definitely could be something that can be incorporated when I do up the spec sheets for the ship when I redo it. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff looking like it's on the horizon for Star Wars, so I definitely enjoyed The Mandalorian when it came out. Haven't had too much time to watch some of the other stuff that has come out since. And, as people who know me, obviously I'm a big sucker for Babylon 5. It was probably one of the first shows that got me into 3D modeling as an interest. And I know a lot of people always say that it, has aged pretty badly, but I still think it looks pretty good for what it was for the time. And it still has, I think, some of the best space battle scenes. Not a lot has really matched it in that regard over the years. Well, I think for Babylon 5, people watch the first season, and that's the most rough part as far as the CGI, and it obviously improved from there. Yeah, Prodigy, that's the new Star Trek series that I'm sort of looking forward to. And the Orville, definitely enjoyed the last season, so looking forward to season 3. Of course, I'm hoping that the rumors of 3 possibly being the last one because Seth MacFarlane not wanting to sort of do more is not a reality, but I guess we'll sort of see. And Strange New Worlds, yeah, that's on the top of my list because for me that's I really enjoyed the new version of Captain Pike, and I really like the concept of returning to that old school, traditional Star Trek kind of series, so that one I'm really excited to see. And The Expanse is always on my list. Like, it's basically been pretty much solid all the way through. And I'm sure, like everybody, definitely crossing my fingers on a new Stargate series, but I'm definitely on the cautious side until things are in production and some sort of actual concept is posted out there. I'm just holding my breath a little bit. Well, and as far as the Expanse, one of the things I do have to do at some point is actually catch up on the books. I started on the first book and just haven't had time to make it through it. Never ever feels like there's enough hours in the day. It's probably one of the reasons that when I'm doing my 3D modeling, I've started to do audio books, because I can at least put them on in the background and let them sort of play out while I do something. And as far as sort of things outside of sci-fi, I finished watching the Castlevania animated series and actually quite enjoyed that. Enjoyed it a lot more than I actually thought I was going to. And I hear that they're going to do the possibility of some spin-off series for that as well. And as far as sort of really weird and bizarre movies, I watched the trailer for, I think it was called The Falling Moon. I really don't know where that movie is going to go, but I'm tempted enough to sort of see it. And since it sort of randomly popped in my mind too, sort of talking about possible other ships and that to do in the future, is growing up I was really big into the old British sci-fi series, and I would definitely like to do at some point my own rendition of some of the elements from Red Dwarf. Well, the main reason that I do the audiobooks is just, you know, it's really hard to find the time to sit and read, because obviously I have quite a bit of stuff going on. You know, there's never not a new project. So it's just for me, you know, to be able to actually enjoy some of these books, it's just a nice way to fit them in. Yeah, I've actually started to do that with audiobooks when I'm driving around for my actual work. Like, I do quite a bit of driving, so again, it's sort of a nice way to fill in things, and it sort of helps break up, like if you're listening to radio stations, things get so repetitive, and it just sort of gets rid of that aspect. Well, if you think trying to find Halo books are hard, you should end up being a Babylon 5 fan and try to find some of those books. Like, I'd love to, get my hand on like the books from the Telepath Wars, and it's just always sad when they go out of print. And you think in the era of digital and whatnot, they would actually try to re-release some of these things because quest for more money. Well, for me it'd be if I was reading them, they'd be in English. Yeah, that would be a pain waiting for books to get translated. That's definitely would be no fun. Well, there's definitely a lot of things that in North America I think we sort of take for granted, and having access to certain things, like as you say, that don't have to get translated, and even things like video games and that, you look at people in Australia and they have to pay an absolute fortune for games, and it's just always sad to see that people can't enjoy those things. I think we'll sort of bring this area out separately from the other part. And sort of talking about video games and that, one of the things I want to do in the nearer future is I got the Homeworld Remastered Edition quite a while back, and have yet to play through it, and it was always one of my favorite games growing up, and enjoying another playthrough with it, especially with the possibility of Homeworld 3 coming out. And one of the saddest ones for me, sort of talking about games, and growing up I was a big fan of the Free Space games, and played the first and second one and the expansion for the first one, and everything sort of left at a cliffhanger, and every few years I keep hoping that somebody will pick up the franchise and maybe decide to finish it off. Yeah, I heard that a bunch of Stargate mods sort of got canned. I think a lot of the Stargate mods being made by, I think it was Phoenix Interactive. But who knows where Stargate will sort of go, like obviously with their deal with Amazon and that. there might be a certain level of willingness to actually do something more with the franchise. As far as the beam weapons from the Daedalus versus the Abydos, the ones on the Daedalus I'd probably put at a higher power rating, just because the ones on the Abydos are sort of a smaller version of them. And same thing with the Phoenix, would be using, a version similar to what the Daedalus has. Well, the good thing though is, at least on some of the other game platforms, there are still a lot of Stargate mods in the works, so even though it sort of sucks to see it gone from the homeworld platform, it's still good to see that it is still being worked on elsewhere by other teams. Are you talking about what the Phoenix has versus what the Abydos has? Because in the case of the Abydos, the setup I have is the beam weapons on it have a beam and pulse mode. And in beam mode, only so many can be fired at the same time, so they'd have to sort of, focus their fire in whatever direction. But in pulse mode, they use less power so that they're able to fire more of them at more targets at the same time. So even though, the Abydos may have less, it may be able to utilize theirs more versus the bigger ship, which is more powerful, but may be able to fire its less. If that makes any kind of sense. Again, the really hard thing with Stargate is obviously you have weapons that are, compared to other races, really ridiculously strong, and so to try to balance things out, especially between ships, is challenging at times, to say the least. Yeah, sort of a very similar concept between phaser strips and phaser cannons, or even, for example, if you're using your phasers, like if you're using the strips as a coherent beam versus firing it in pulses. So when you're firing it in pulses, yeah, you may end up having a less powerful shot, but you can hit more targets. And sort of talking about the concept of phasers, one of the reasons that the the gate ship that I built had plasma beams, as I was talking to a friend of mine, and he suggested the concept that O'Neill really would want to have phasers on a ship, and the closest technology that we had to phasers were beam weapons, or the plasma beams, so I sort of just had to incorporate that to sort of tie in with that Stargate humor that we're all used to. Yeah, the Horizon missile was definitely a good way to solve pesky larger problems. It was always one of my favorite scenes in Stargate Atlantis, watching the missiles come in and basically blow up the different cities. And could call it one of those Stargate wow moments. Well, I'm sure if I did, when I rebuild my Excalibur, if they ever, in my own personal universe, if they did build a second one, you're definitely pretty sure that the second one would have to be called Enterprise. So if any of the Stargate series ever did get continued, what elements that were sort of left as loose ends would you all like to sort of get tied up? Like, I know for myself, if it was Atlantis, it would actually be nice for them to, one day actually find a drone factory, be it either on another planet or on Atlantis itself. To sort of have it ironically next to whatever room that McKay is in, and for whatever reason they just didn't get around to checking that room and didn't think about it and just thought it was another area, and hold and behold, he's sitting next to a whole room full of drones ready to go. Well, from what my understanding is, like, I've never read the books, but my understanding is eventually Pegasus did, or Atlantis did return to Pegasus. But it would be sort of interesting to see them tie up the storyline behind the Wraith. Definitely having one of those modeling moments where you're not sure what you want to do with something and you sit there for 10 minutes spinning it around. Yeah, it would be nice to see them actually do something with the Lucian Alliance. Like in a direct military sort of confrontation, I don't think they'd be able to really stand up to Earth per se. But I could see them launching sort of a guerrilla campaign and sort of focus on hit and run attacks and sort of try to prevent Earth from gaining access to different necessary resources to expand their fleets and ships. And like, I definitely feel as an enemy they were sort of squandered a little bit. And it would be interesting to see, you know, how the Jaffa would eventually sort of form into their own society and sort of grow as a people. Well, and that's sort of talking about the Jaffa. It's one of the reasons I actually sort of enjoyed working on the shuttle for me. You know, it's sort of the concept of getting the thought of where they could have went and what they would have done with the technology that they were left with. And like, I could definitely see them taking, you know, Gould technology and simplifying it and sort of basically keeping the cultural element, because that was what they were part of for so long, but sort of removing the fanciness and making it more practical. And I can sort of still see them, you know, as time going on, teaming up with the Tok'ra again, and you know, as time passes and wounds heal, and you know, there's still, I'm sure, minor system lords out there that, you know, still have to be round up, and maybe it'll be a deal between the Tok'ra for the Jaffa to use their military power to sort of round up the last of the Gould that are on the run, and in exchange they would help them expand and develop and understand the technology. Stargate Universe, I have so many sort of mixed thoughts on. Like, at first, it just wasn't clicking for me, and then finally towards the end last season, they finally, you know, started to get to the point where it just, the show finally felt like it found its footing. And for me, the first couple seasons were, you know, there was no real center element. There was just, like, I understand that they're lost and it's all about survival, but the show really needed some sort of real solid villain. And without it, it just sort of felt like it spun its wheels around and around and around and just wasn't gaining any traction. And then obviously in the last season, when they were battling with the various sort of different races, the one that was trying to capture the ship, and then the sort of low-tech, I guess you'd call them, replicators. The show finally felt like it had the proper pressure that it needed and a villain that you could actually get behind. It's definitely interesting to sort of hear what got changed. Like, it's been a little while since I've gone through the series myself. And I'll admit there's some things that over time I've started to forget too. Yeah, Nequadria was an experiment on Aquita, if I remember. But wasn't the concept of the planet from Stargate universe, wasn't it a planet that they found that an experiment was still carried on, or did they actually just say it was a natural element on that planet? Well, then it's not impossible that the element could be created naturally. Like maybe it was the concept of like a freak occurrence kind of thing, and the experiment was trying to replicate what happened in nature that could actually do it on a massive scale. Like it could be something with a certain type of star and a certain type of radiation, and unless you have those specific conditions, which are really rare. So maybe they were trying to research on how it would actually happen, and then how to actually, make it into an actual production kind of thing. That's the only way I could sort of thinking of sort of well, just may end up being one of those show mistakes. Unfortunately, it's sort of like ship dimensions where you may have set sizes, but your ships will vary in size depending on how they need to look at whatever specific shot. So ship sizes have been a thing of contention for as far as I can remember back. You just have to look at Babylon 5 and the whole argument over the size of the White Star. I don't think a ship has been adjusted so many times in scale as that one. I think the only thing that's been worse than the scale of ship sizes is discussions over weapon stats for things like Star Wars. I always remember very heated debates with individuals on how powerful Star Wars shields are, how powerful Star Wars weapons are. Turbo lasers, they're lasers, so they can't penetrate shields because shields block lasers. I agree on the larger size for the 304. It definitely, when you actually look at the different elements, I definitely feel that it does feel a lot more natural in that scale. And that's pretty much what my ships are sort of scaled to. Yeah, I guess it would be, well, depending on, what side of half you want to be on. Yeah, it'd be pretty close, I imagine, in that scale. Yeah, the Ori ship was always sort of interesting because in most of the one-on-one battles they focused on its main sort of beam weapon, but when you watch the small or the sort of fleet battles, especially with the Hawks, you see that it has like a sort of like a pulse weapon, and it just shreds things with those. And sort of talking about the Ori ships, one of the things that I sort of was thinking about not too long ago is when you look at the weapon setup and power systems on the Ori motherships, they really remind me of the progenitors from Homeworld. Because everything's based around like a very big power source that's drawing energy in from, you know, some sort of fabric of space, and then you have these giant beam cannons, and then, you know, the ships are armed with these little pulse weapons that shred little frigates like they're not even there. So it always sort of reminded me of that. And it is sort of true, as you pointed out, that you know, outside of near the beginning of Stargate, the Hawks have basically become the punching boy ship of the Stargate universe. So outside of specialty ships, like, I really wish that we got to see more of Apophysis flagship in action. Always sort of had a vision on, like, his flagship, those massive arms being like some sort of charging port for like a massive weapon that would just, you know, carve through Hawks like they weren't even there. And the other thing that I sort of wish that we would have saw more of is, again, I think it was Anubis that had them, and that was the Hawks with cloaking devices. Again, so many different technologies that could have been expanded on and then sort of phased away. And when I do get around to doing more ships for the Free Jaffa, I really do want to sort of explore what they're doing with their fleet, because, as you sort of pointed out, the Hawks have basically become space cannon fodder. And you know, you sort of look at the battles between Anubis, Baal, Replicators, Lucian Alliance. There really can't be that many, you know, Hawks actually left in any kind of decent operating order. So one of the things as far as villains that I want to do in my post-disclosure Stargate future, so I've been sort of working on like a timeline, is I do want to sort of find a way to make the Goa'uld semi-relevant again. And to do that, I want to take the concept of some of the surviving minor system lords and Goa'uld that managed to escape. Eventually they'd come across a base that the ancients built, so before the plague wiped them out, they were originally going to try to retake Pegasus from the Wraith. So they built a massive foundry facility for building up a huge fleet to actually do that. And I think it'd be kind of fun to, have them find something like that and utilize the ancient technology and, become sort of relevant in that way again. Well, and again, that's the nice thing about the Stargate franchise. It really leaves itself open to a lot of possibilities. Like, there's definitely not a lack of, storylines that a person can sort of choose to follow if they just use a little imagination and build off of it. Yeah, I always did like her ship. I like the whole aspect of the bottom folding out into the sort of spike at the bottom, and again, it was sort of that throwback to the, what would you say, Goa'uld technology, like in the helmets where they'd fold up into themselves, and so I sort of like that as an aspect of working that into the show. At least a sort of a different imaginative method. Yeah, I always thought that her ship was sort of a smaller size, and I don't think it was quite the size of a shuttle, but maybe somewhere between the shuttle and maybe the El-Cache, maybe sort of that medium stage. Yeah, I gotta hate when you're trying to do something and something crashes and something breaks along the way. Sort of reminds me when I was doing a 3D print for some family members, and everything was going good, and left it overnight and woke up in the morning, and for what reason it decided to stop halfway and just sit there. And sort of talking about kind of one-off ships and that is the always remember that ship from, I believe the episode was Grace. Like, it would have been nice to sort of follow up and, you know, find out if it actually wasn't a Shen ship or who it actually belonged to. And it would have been nice to sort of find out what happened to the civilization from Space Race. I know it was sort of mentioned that the Ori, when they were doing their campaign, took over their homeworld. But it would have been interesting to see what ended up happening with their civilization. And I like to believe somewhere out there, you know, there's some Tolan that actually survived too. Like, their civilization as a whole may have been pretty much totaled, but, you know, I like to think that some of them were off-world when it was attacked and that there was some sort of survivors. I'll take a look at what you did in a couple minutes. Just trying to figure out what I want to do here. And I think once I'm sort of done this section, I'm going to start wrapping up because it's getting close to lunchtime and my stomach's starting to make that wonderful hungry sound. And as far as future streams, like, I do want to continue working on the Mara as far as streaming, and most likely it'll end up being on weekends because that's sort of when I have a little bit more free time. Like I might do some stuff in between, may or may not necessarily be modeling related. Like I say, I do want to sort of do a playthrough of the remastered edition of Homeworld, so I might sort of do that as a good opportunity to sit and chat with people while I sort of do that. And sort of just share the nostalgia element from the game. It does sound like quite a few of you were quite big fans of the game when it originally came out. Yeah, that's very true. The galaxy definitely needs a few battle crabs. Kind of a setup for a joke that the universe was good until we caught the crabs. And as far as sci-fi, that's probably still one of my favorite ships. Like, a combination of the design and just the sound that they used when it sort of traveled by, that screaming sound. Like, you can watch a video without any audio on and you'll hear the sound of a battle crab in your head. Well, this has actually come quite a ways today. Sort of tackled the one area I wanted to get done for sure. Made quite a decent dent into the front end. Like I want to really focus completely done and then sort of start to feel like things are getting completed. But yeah, she's really coming along good. Still haven't fully decided what I want to do with these back tip areas. Like, part of me is debating maybe putting some sort of fin on them. Sort of try to give the ship a little bit more of an aircraft feel to it. And as far as engines, I'm still debating whether to go with more of a circular thruster kind of design, or do something a little bit more different in that aspect. And I also want to sort of incorporate the sort of hovering thrusters, maybe some along there and something in the front area, even though it does have sort of downward thrusters along the wings. but you can never ever have enough thrusters. But yeah, I think that's sort of where I'm going to call it for today. And, you know, like always, if anybody wants to give some input, always welcome. Suggestions for future projects, again, always welcome. I know a lot of people know where to get a hold of me. Obviously, I'm on things like Facebook, Devon and Art, ArtStation. And I'm also on Discord, and I've also started to do some stuff on Twitter, so definitely a lot of ways to get a hold of me. Yeah, it sort of became the symbol of choice. True. Yeah, both could be used. There's definitely nothing stopping from both being incorporated. And for me, like I do like to incorporate the small little elements from the show into the designs. I think that's sort of a nice way to pay homage to the, you know, the people that originally worked on the shows. And as far as engines on the back, it just, I don't know, it just, for me, it sort of balances the design. Don't know why, I just like engines on the back. Well, I'm going to wrap it up and have lunch, and again, thank you for everybody that has come out, and definitely enjoyed talking with everybody, and definitely would like to do this again. Hopefully this weekend I'll have some time and we'll carry on the model then. And as I said, just, you know, feel free, everything's casual. Just Stargate, Star Trek, sci-fi, fantasy, it's all good. Okay, thank you everybody, and have a good day.